Hey, if you want your team to stop asking for direction and start driving outcomes, today's the moment. This is step 9 of empowerment design, and it's about creating independent accountability. That's not just handing out tasks, my friends. That's tracking something bigger. It's actually transferring ownership. And today, we're going to dig deep into the how to do that. How do you move your people from compliance to commitment? From things like, tell me what to do, to I've already started thinking about the solution. From waiting to owning. Because ownership doesn't happen when you say, I trust you. It happens when you design for it, intentionally, visibly, and consistently. So let's start with the trap. Most companies wait until someone proves that they can handle more before giving them ownership. Now, here's the problem with that. People don't rise in a vacuum. They rise when they're activated. When there's a structure that pulls leadership out of them, not pressure that pushes it onto them. So let's talk about how you build that structure. Ownership isn't transferred in a single conversation. It's not about saying, you got this, and then just hoping for the best. It's a pattern, a rhythm, a way of leading that helps people step into responsibility with clarity and courage. Now, the first shift in that is language. In task-driven companies, leaders say things like, let me know when it's done, or just keep me posted, or the worst one of all, I'm going to circle back and check in later. But in companies that are built around ownership, the language changes. It sounds like, what's your plan for this? What's your target outcome? Or what support do you need to own this fully? What will success look like when you deliver it? Now, the shift here, it's not a subtle one. It's transformational. Because what you're doing is inviting people to think, not just do. You're giving them space to engage with the result, not just the instructions. Here's a story about that. Founder I worked with, we're going to call her Jamie. She was running a fast-growing deck building company. Great team, passionate people. But she kept saying stuff like, I feel like I'm still in the center of everything. Everybody's capable, but they're constantly checking in with me. Now, here's what we found. It was really simple. The team had never been given full ownership lanes. They weren't incompetent. They were untrained in what real accountability really looked like. So we implemented a new rhythm. Every project now had a single point of ownership. Not shared, not vague, not we're all working on this one together. One person, fully visible, full responsibility. Not to do everything, but to ensure it got done right, and got aligned with the bigger picture. That person had to do one thing every time they took on ownership. Define the win. So before kickoff, they answered 3 questions. What does success look like? What's the timeline that supports that success? And how will we know when we're on track before we ever get to the finish line? Now, those 3 questions alone changed the entire energy of the team. Now, instead of Jamie being the one chasing down updates, clarifying scope, and adjusting timelines on the fly, her team came to her with plans, updates, pivots, and progress. They weren't just completing projects, they were leading projects. Now, that's what happens when you stop assigning work and start transferring ownership. But there's something else that needs to be said here. Ownership without support is an absolute setup for failure. You can't ask your team to lead if you don't also give them the structure, the feedback, and the space to learn. So once you assign ownership, the next critical move is to create what we call feedback rhythm, not micromanagement. Rhythm. Here's the difference. Micromanagement feels like, hey, I'm watching you. Feedback rhythm feels like, hey, I'm with you. It's scheduled, it's consistent, it's light touch, but it's where ownership is mentored, not corrected. And then the way you do it really matters. In companies with really weak accountability, feedback is super reactive. It only shows up when something has already gone wrong. In companies with empowered leadership, feedback is proactive. It shows up early. It's conversational. And the best part, it's actually expected. And it builds ownership by reminding people, this matters, you matter, now let's grow it together. Let me give you another real world example. One of our clients, service-based company, they had 14 different field techs, and they used to operate on task completion alone. So each day, jobs were assigned, right? And each day, the owner received a string of reactive texts, phone calls, and notes. Things like, this part's missing, or the client changed their mind, or look, I didn't even get the schedule today. It was chaos, and no one felt like they could lead. So we restructured the handoff process, and we started using what we call the ownership brief. Every technician received their daily assignments accompanied by a short, structured briefing. But this wasn't just a list of tasks, it was a leadership cue. Every assignment came with 4 key pieces of context designed to shift the mindset from task execution to outcome ownership. First thing, it clearly outlined the purpose of the job, why this project mattered both to the business and to the client. It wasn't just install the unit or complete a repair. It was framed as, this job completes a 3-week renovation timeline. Your work today either holds or breaks the promise we made to this client. That one thing alone shifted their sense of weight and responsibility. Second part of the briefing, it named the client's highest priority, not from a technical perspective, but from a human one. This client is most concerned about cleanliness, or this client is anxious about timing. Make sure they know what's happening and when. This turned technicians from service providers into experienced leaders. They weren't just doing the job, they were now protecting and cultivating trust. Third part of the briefing, it flagged one potential area of risk for the team to be aware of. Maybe the layout was unusual. Maybe there was a supply day or a history of scope creep. Instead of leaving it vague and reactive, they were told up front, this might happen. Here's how to spot it early on. That anticipation gave them agency. Instead of waiting for problems to escalate, they were empowered to intercept those problems right up front. And finally, the note clarified what done right actually looked like, not what done looked like. It painted a picture of the standard. Done right means we tested twice, the tools are put away, and the client walked through all of the work with complete clarity. Now, this eliminated ambiguity. It created alignment around quality before the job was even started. But of course, we didn't stop there. After the job was completed, every technician was responsible for submitting a simple but powerful reflection, what we called the outcome recap. Now, this wasn't a checkbox. It was not a report card. It was a leadership moment. So each person answered 4 specific questions. First question, what went well? So we named the wins, what landed, what felt smooth, where that technician saw their own progress in their process. Second question, what didn't go well? Not from a place of blame, but from curiosity. What was clunky? What could have been better? What resistance showed up that we didn't expect? Third question, what did you do to solve it? This was where the ownership came alive. Instead of saying, it got really hard, they had to articulate, here's how I navigated that. It forced reflection on decision making, and it turned problems into personal leadership case studies. Final question, what would they suggest improving next time? Oh man, this is where insight was mined. Sometimes it was a process tweak. Sometimes it was client expectation to clarify. Sometimes it was just a realization about their own maybe not so good habits. No matter what, they were building the business from the field, not just working in it anymore. Now, this 2-part structure, ownership briefing on the front end and outcome reflection on the back end, it radically transformed the culture. Technicians started walking into jobs with strategy. They started thinking like project owners, not just service providers. And they walked away from every job with insight, not just more mileage. That's what happens when you stop assigning jobs and start transferring ownership. That feedback loop created something that they had never felt before, agency. Now, when something didn't go as planned, they weren't getting reprimanded. They were reflecting, contributing, owning. Oh, and the shift in morale, oh my gosh, you guys, it was remarkable. One of the techs who had almost quit before we started this said, for the first time, I feel like this company actually trusts us to lead. Oh, how awesome is that? That's the power of ownership transfer. It turns disengaged executors into empowered builders. And when you back that ownership with mentoring, not control, people grow faster than you thought possible. Now, let me talk about the hardest part of transferring lead ownership. That's letting people make their own mistakes and then to own them. Because if you rescue every time something goes sideways, they're never going to step into true leadership. You have to let the rope go far enough for them to feel that tension and still trust themselves to pull through. Now, this doesn't mean abandoning them. It means believing in them. Even when it might be slower at first, because it probably will be. Even when they fumble, because they're going to. And even when your instinct is to jump in and just fix it. Now, that instinct, that's the thing you have to fight. Because fixing reinforces dependency. And mentoring reinforces development. So the next time someone drops the ball, just pause. Ask, what do you think went wrong? What would you do differently? What support do you need to solve this next time without me? And then listen, because that's how ownership takes real root. It's not when things are easy, but when someone learns how to lead through failure. One more story. Founder we worked with, his name was Jaden. He'd been carrying the weight of sales for 4 years. He was the only one who could do it. His team could execute everywhere else, but they couldn't drive leads. They couldn't close deals. They couldn't push momentum until one day, Jaden made a decision. He would not be the primary closer anymore. Terrifying, right? So he chose one person and he brought her in and he walked her through every deal that he had. He taught her the tone, the questions, the rhythm, but more importantly, he gave her the outcome. These are the numbers. This is what matters. This is the culture of our clients. And now I want you to own this. And then he set up weekly checkpoints, not to review scripts, but to reflect on strategy. So within 3 months, this new salesperson had increased close rates by 15% higher than the founder. And within 6 months, she was mentoring the next hire. My friends, that's what happens when ownership is transferred with clarity and trust. It scales, it matures, and then it compounds. Because now you're not the only one that's thinking like a leader. You're not the only one that's guarding the culture. You've multiplied the mission. That's the heartbeat. That's the core of step 9 in empowerment design. And I love it. You don't just build structure. You build self-led leaders. And when those leaders own their lanes with clarity and care, your business is going to stop stalling. It's going to stop breaking every time the leader blinks, breathes, or just needs a break. It starts growing with rhythm and alignment and real momentum. So let me invite you to do something. Choose one process, one project, one initiative in the next week and transfer full ownership. I'm not talking about task delegation, full ownership. Say, here's the outcome. I trust you to lead it. Let's check in with each other at key moments, but this is yours. And then give them space. Mentor them, reflect them with them, but let them carry it. And when they do, you're not just removing weight from your shoulders. You're building capacity into your culture. That's how we scale. That's how we lead. And that's how we build what lasts together. Now, in the next 2 lives, we're going through Empowerment Design Step 10. It is my favorite part of the journey. It's where everything comes together and ties it up so that you're growing, empowering, and leading. So don't miss the next live. Come back Tuesday, same time, and we'll wrap this thing up in a way that will supercharge everything that you're trying to do. See you then.